Okay, Twitter, I'll take the bait. It's time to talk about Jimmy Olsen. Guys, gals, and non-binary pals, welcome to Then and Now, the sporadic, overly talkative show where I, AJ the Comic Archivist, compares the first issue of a comic book title with the latest first issue of that same title. But before I get into the comics proper, I'd like to shout out crowdfunding for comic books because, honestly, indie comics can be some of the best places to hear fresh new voices without that burden of mainstream need. Yes, that is partially because I grew up reading 70s and 80s indie comics. That's comics with an X. However, I couldn't decide on a specific crowdfunding, so I'm going to pivot over and say everyone should go check out ZOOP.gg. ZOOP is a crowdfunding website specifically for comic book readers and creators, with a fantastic selection with tons more on the way. If you need a specific, I've praised David F. Walker on this channel a lot, so I have to go give a spotlight to Imposter Syndrome, but then again I'm a puzzle guy and a Rocketeer fan, so that puzzle is calling out to me. And of course, given my own personal life, and a shout out to Jay, parent to my children, and Jello in my earliest first issues videos from 8 years ago now, yeesh, I've had to get the Protect Trans Kid charity pin. Go and check out this amazing website, and hey, if you support something because of me, give me a shout out. This isn't sponsored in any way, other than I am always up for supporting the indie scene, so definitely check them out. Link in the description. Now then, back to taking Twitter bait. Jimmy Olsen. Jimmy Olsen has a weird history as a character. While there was a nameless office boy, who was basically a glorified extra with a few lines here and there, did originally pop up in Action Comics number 6 in 1938, which has officially been retconned to be the first appearance of Jimmy Olsen. He wouldn't become a named character in the comics until 1941, with Superman number 13. The reason for this is actually producer Bob Maxwell, who had to give a name to the office boy for the Adventures of Superman radio show, and thus, beginning on April 15th, 1940, Jimmy Olsen came onto the scene to much success. I most definitely will have to cover the Adventures of Superman radio show in a special of some sort along the way, because it has a long, rich history, complete with being so popular that it actually actively hurt the Ku Klux Klan when they decided to make a storyline in 1946 about Superman smashing the Klan, which also got turned into a comic which was really good. And no, this isn't a side talk, the radio show is paramount to Jimmy Olsen's popularity. In the comics, Jimmy Olsen was the office gopher, and would spend much of the 40s that way, be it Action Comics, Superman Solo, or even World's Finest in that role. But the popularity of the character would explode after the Adventures of Superman radio show became a TV show, and that was Jack Larson's portrayal. That is the major crux for why suddenly Lois Lane and Jimmy Olsen were able to spin off so lucratively into their own comics. Now, I've already covered Lois Lane on a Then and Now, but Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen started 4 years before that, in 1954. That same year, Jimmy Olsen would stop being the office boy and graduate into being a full-fledged, though still inexperienced, reporter. The comic itself, Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen, is probably the oddest thing to talk about as a whole, because there is just so much weirdness within its pages. I'm talking about him being teleported to Krypton pre-explosion. He marries Supergirl for a little bit. He dates Lucy Lane, Lois's younger sister. He becomes Turtle Boy. He becomes Elastilad for the Legion of Superheroes, which is a team that just is insane all by itself. He has his own fan club because he's Superman's pal. In this time, he also teams up with Superman to become superheroes in the Bottle City of Kandor, hilariously named Nightwing and Flamebird. Granted, it is only funny because of how iconic the Nightwing name would become under the Bat family of titles. Then there's the 1970s with the character, where Jack Kirby got the helm of the series. This would be huge because this is where the fourth world, the Jack Kirby New Gods and Darkseid and all that, would be introduced. So would Project Cadmus, Intergang, and basically whatever Jack Kirby's head was coming up with. Like reintroducing characters from the Golden Age, like Guardian. There were vampires, werewolves, and even the Loch Ness Monster showed up. Hell, even Don Rickles had a 2-part story before Kirby's final issue. And officially, though, this first run of Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen would end with issue 163 in 1974. There's a bit of an asterisk there, though, because at the time, the 3 non-Superman titles, Superman's Pal, Superman's Girlfriend, and Supergirl, were all waning in sales, so DC decided to combine them all into the Superman Family Anthology book, which would use the Jimmy Olsen numbering system. It would still have Jimmy Olsen's specific stories in it, and it would run until 1982 with issue number 222. The character himself would be a mainstay in all Superman titles, even with his own solo and solo stories going along. And yes, he was changed more or less to just modernize him being a cub reporter after Crisis on Infinite Earths. Although there was a few times he was laid off, which gave him the Turtle Boy gimmick for a series of commercials, and even in the 90s, he actually quit the Daily Planet to become an investigative reporter with Galaxy Broadcasting. But back on title history, in 2003, Chuck Austen, yes, the same one who did so many dirty things to the X-Men franchise around this time, wrote the Superman Metropolis miniseries, with Jimmy Olsen as a central figure, showing what life in Metropolis was like for average citizens after Brainiac essentially turned it into the City of Tomorrow with super high-tech tech. The biggest focus that Jimmy Olsen had without Superman is within the truly hated comic book series Countdown to Final Crisis, which was about 4 crises ago at this point in DC's history. Something I really didn't bring up in the first run is that Jimmy Olsen has a very long history of transforming into things, like Turtle Boy, a Viking, a human octopus, a woman, a werewolf, and just anything you can think of he's probably turned into it. Well, with the Death of the New Gods as one of the many tie-in miniseries, Jimmy Olsen begins to transform and develop different superpowers. This is him, in-universe, having the souls of all the new gods within him, even if most of the powers he showcases aren't actually new god powers. And ultimately, it does boil down to a bunch of, well, that was pointless. Countdown was just terrible, okay? Although, I could totally see the Jimmy Olsen stuff being a huge Grant Morrison grab for Final Crisis, due to there being this wicked cool theory that Final Crisis was actually a meta-commentary on the DC Universe as a whole, and comics in general. And honestly, much of Jimmy Olsen's involvement kind of does has that feel to it. However, that is its own can of worms to talk about, and eventually I will cover it. Either way, Jimmy would have some small spotlight stories in the Superman books, but it wouldn't be until the epic New Krypton story where he'd get his own solo 2-issue special by James Robinson, which actually was a very good way for the military and government side of what was happening at the time. Essentially, the New Krypton story is they finally got, I believe it was Kandor or something like that, and they created a new Krypton for all the people all the Kryptonians, and so now there is a planet of super people flying around. It's actually really good for the most part. In the last days of Action Comics before the New 52 inning, Jimmy Olsen had his own backup story in Action Comics number 893 to 896, and then wrapped up in a special one-shot called Jimmy Olsen number 1. Nick Spencer penned it, and it actually introduces Chloe Sullivan from Smallville into the DC Universe proper. However, the New 52 happened, and Jimmy was rebooted into being a cub reporter for the Planet, but also a rich, preppy boy who got to live rent-free in his apartment. Yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of this version, but he was still there as a supporting character for the most part. Luckily, I have something a lot more recent to talk about than that. Something that came out in 2019, a 12-part miniseries by Matt Fraction. It was fundamentally a comedy book, but it works so well, and we'll get into that when we get to it. But yes, it definitely goes to bringing a lot more of the youthful, fun Jimmy Olsen from the before New 52, the post-crisis, and even the pre-crisis, into the DC Rebirth proper. And yes, we will get to that obviously. But first, on to something that shouldn't take as long as the Batman then took. Let's hop back to the fabulous 50s. Superman's Pal, Jimmy Olsen, number 1, Volume 1, written by Otto Binder, pencils by Kurt Swan, inks by Ray Burnley, and letters by Pat Gordon. There's no credited colorist that I can find through research and mostly Google, although I'm sure there is some interviewer secondhand info from the 70s or 80s that has one. Anyone knows anything, please let me know. Also, I'll be skipping the non-Jimmy comics, but let's be fair, everyone already agrees with Buzzy. Work can be fun! In the 1950s when there was a middle class to aspire to. Okay, sorry, that was petty. Keep burning those candles at both ends, friends. Okay, trying not to make this a 45-minute video, so let's begin this 3-story book with The Boy of 1,000 Faces. No truer description of Jimmy Olsen could ever follow him throughout his lifetime. We open our tale with a rather rude ice cream vendor whizzing by a mom who wants ice cream for her kids, who seem to be dressed as cowboys. It's the 50s, I don't gotta explain anything. But this ice cream vendor seems to be on the prowl, seeing 2 of Deuce Dorgan's men and eavesdropping on them. However, he is so bad at tailing them, he does get their attention and tries to cover his tracks by trying to sell them some ice cream. It does not work out well. The thugs cream the vendor in the face with his own Sonic Pops, or as a modern take on that, the SpongeBob Popsicles. I'm getting a bit too old for hip internet references. And they shove him into traffic. Luckily, this is Metropolis, so Superman swoops in to save the young boy, who's actually Jimmy Olsen. It's a good thing Soup saved him so we can get a quick, "Oh, still working on the jewelry store robberies case." And when Superman flies off, Jimmy finds one of the goons drop something, so he does finally have a lead. There's only one course now for this fledgling reporter, begging the Daily Planet editor, Perry White, to borrow the flying newsroom, which is essentially the company helicopter, so he can continue following up on this unsolved crime by himself. And Perry lets him use it. He's very persuasive. We also get a nice little cameo from Lois and Clark, who give him the standard, "Now you be careful, boy." Of course, he doesn't need to be careful since he has a special Superman SOS signal in his watch, so he can call the Big Blue Boy Scout whenever he gets into trouble. I'm sure that won't become a trope. Jimmy heads up to the roof and is met by the pilot, Jumbo Jones. No, I said Jumbo Jones, not Jimbo Jones. Yeah, I'll be honest, Jumbo Jones is a recurring extra that I actually didn't know about until this issue. Oh, and I was wrong. The flying newsroom isn't just a helicopter. It's a unique, one-of-a-kind, futuristic helicopter with such marvels as a filing cabinet and a box of hats. I kid, though, since if you saw someone in a white trilby and a checkered coat, you know he's gonna get his way. He walks right up to Deuce Dorgan and his men's hideout, pretending to be a Fuller Brush man, a door-to-door salesman for household goods like a scrub brush. It was what MLMs did before your old high school friend you never talked to started messaging you about becoming your own boss. Totally unrelated, but something neat I found out. The Fuller Brush Company was brought by the Sara Lee Corporation in the late 60s. Never say you didn't learn anything useful here. Oh right, the comic. So yeah, they actually let him go and test out his samples in the kitchen by doing their dishes. He actually does this. But it does give him the ability to spy on them while he's washing their dishes. Yet, after staring out the window for some time, someone actually notices that he's spying and comes to take out the faux salesman. But Jimmy Olsen has a standard high-pressure knockout pen to down the first guy before he can draw his gun. Then Jimmy chucks all the brushes that he brought in the suitcase at the other two so he can run away to the helicopter. He reaches the helicopter and Jumbo does try helping cover the escape, but gun beats fist, so they stop swinging to get captured. They get tied too? Wait, I've been wanting to use this joke for about 8 years now. They get tied too? The Death Tier. Side note, everyone should go binge watch Baywatching, Manic episodes, movie nights. Extra props for those who become a patron solely so Lupa can cover the Quantum Leap comics. Come on, there's aliens! Link in the description, but then again, Alison Pregler is way more popular than me, so I'm just a tear in the rain. So Jimmy and Jumbo are tied to the supports of a dock because that'll keep them so that the thugs can finish them off later, or give them time to escape, depending on how you want to look at it, as a seashell washes into Jimmy's hand so he can cut one hand free. Using his teeth, he gives a twist of the controls to summon Superman. I'm going on record to say that Superman, or anyone really, should never call anyone their boy pal. Just feels a little dirty, especially when stripping down to your red undies. Hearing the whistle only he can hear, Superman flies in, pulling out the supports, which collapses the pier so that the jewel thieves can be caught. Long story short, Superman nabs the gangsters, and Jimmy uncovers that they were hiding the stolen jewels on a fishing line the whole time. He then breaks the case to Perry, and gets a final super duper! Yeah, that seems to be his catchphrase. I mean, for the boy of 100 faces, he had 3 if we include his own. But hey, there's 2 more stories, so maybe there's more faces in it. The next story is The Case of the Lumberjack Jinx, and I'm making a promise now that I won't reference Monty Python here, mostly because YouTube already flagged them, so I'm retaking this entire thing. But know that the jokes are there for the taking. The tale begins with Perry White trying to find out where all their tree pulp for their paper stock is, since they haven't gotten any yet. Yes, long ago there was something called paper. You know what? I'm not even going to finish the most okay boomer joke I would have ever made, and I've already referenced the Fuller Brush man. Think about that. Anywho, without the pulp to make the paper can't come out. So Perry White sends Jimmy Olsen, under the alias of Jimmy Wayne, to crack the case of this phony jinx that's holding up production at the Meredith Lumber Camp. One plane ride later, he meets up with Paul Meredith, the owner, who gets him right to work. Meanwhile, up on one of the roads above the logging area, a logging truck's chain snaps. hurtling a giant tree at Jimmy. Cue Final Destination joke. Luckily, Jimmy happens to be the high jump record holder at Metropolis High, so he can hop over the log without any worry. Climbing up the mountain to see what happened, we see Paul Meredith yelling at Otis Burton, a competitor in the logging trade, who just happened to have a flat tire right by the truck. And yeah, he was even there when the chain broke, so Jimmy starts to suspect this guy. Jimmy traces Burton's boot prints back into the woods to find a stump with drill marks in it. However, he's also being eyed by one of the boss's goons, who's told by a note to take out the snooping Jimmy Wayne kid. He tries to do so with some dynamite under a stump. Jimmy thinks that it's bees or wasps that he's hearing, and he runs away right before it explodes. Jimmy then sees the attempted murderer trying to flee and chases after him, only to wind up running over logs on a river, and then falling into the river and nearly being crushed by them in the water. However, that's only a hiccup in this case, because, for a twist, Jimmy saves himself and continues on. Within the 30 seconds it took for Jimmy to follow this guy, the guy has already started a forest fire, which was his original job. Jimmy catches up with him and, with a voyeuristic Superman watching, because he has to check up on his little buddy, knocks the evil lumberjack out. However, he's not done showing his competence, as Jimmy uses knocking down a log jam to splash water on the fire before it spreads too far. That's when Superman hops in to formally arrest the real mastermind. No, it's not Red Herring. It's actually Old Man Paul Meredith himself. You see, in what is essentially a Scooby-Doo plot without anyone wearing masks, there was actually a rash of beetle blight on the trees, which meant that Paul's lumberyard was going to take a massive hit to profits. However, if there was a rash of jinxes, which culminated in a forest fire that destroyed his crops, he would be able to collect the insurance and keep his reputation. Well, with all that wrapped up, Otis Burton will now supply the paper pulp for the planet, and thus the day is saved, and Jimmy gets a front page story with his name in the headline and everything. We come to the final story, and it is probably the most out there of these stories, which are generally grounded in at least some form of realism. This is The Man of Steel Substitute. While every other story focuses on Jimmy Olsen as his own person, with Superman around essentially to give an out at the very end, we look at his life as the open boy pal of Superman. People keep calling him at the Daily Planet for the most trivial things they want Superman to do, like, "My cat's caught up a tree," and "Could you mind my cranky baby?" Yes, this feels like how people would actually be. Someone even brings their safe in because they forgot the combination and wants Superman to just rip it open. There is a slightly more pressing matter that is ramping up beyond the town at a bridge being built. At the bridge site, there's a couple issues that Superman apparently was going to help out. Superman promised to check over the girders since there was a defective batch according to the steel place, and Superman also rounded up a lot of homeless or down on their luck folk from Skid Row, or as this comic suggests, people who just want to leech off the system and not work because they're lazy. Yeah, they just want to walk off the site because Superman's not there to bolster their morale. So the foreman calls Jimmy Olsen to tell Superman to get down there and bolster morale. I think the girders are a bit more important, but hey, Superman is Superman no matter what he's doing. Yet, when he can't reach Superman, Jimmy grabs some props and gets his own Superman outfit on, because don't we all have one? And then heads down to the construction site to do some shenanigans. First, he uses a lens with Superman's picture on it to cast a shadow of Superman flying in. Then he uses a projector and a giant fan to show Superman actually flying with everyone seeing him. So then Jimmy can stand up and pretend to be Superman just standing there. Using a spliced recording of a lot of old speeches Superman has done, he tries to bolster morale and tell people to get back to work. Then Jimmy uses an old balloon from a parade to show something flying off. Yeah, much of this is logistics of faking flight. However, suddenly, a girder breaks. Jimmy gets stuck to a tree, and the balloon falls down into the crowd. So the men are gonna leave, all the while the bridge is about to collapse. But of course, Superman is actually there, I assume dressed as one of the bums since he's taking off a hat and coat. He repairs the bridge because of course he does, and then gives a talking to those lazy bums who are immediately ready to get back to work and not let Superman down by acting like lazy bums. It's very, very red state in writing if you catch my meaning. And of course, the issue ends with Superman telling Jimmy that Jimmy did only what a true friend would do, trying to help out someone who he thought was in trouble. And so he's still Superman's boy pal. And one final super duper! Now I admit I haven't read this before today, and from what I assumed it would be, the first two stories genuinely surprised me with how well they were. Yes, they're still very compressed in storytelling since they're only a maximum of like 10 pages per, but Jimmy Olsen comes off as a competent main character, not just a wacky boy doing wacky things. And even the third story was showing some basic thought behind what he was doing, and yes, suspension of disbelief aside, the main drawback to me though would be the poorly aged. Clearly, these men are so hard up that they don't want to work, which is its own rant, but overall it was a lot more grounded in Jimmy Olsen as a reporter and someone who has a brain than I actually thought it would be. Now then, the real question is, does that competence last until 2019? Let's find out together. Written by Matt Fraction, art by Steve Lieber, colors by Nathan Fairbairn, and Clayton Cowles on letters. This is the 2019 Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen. Being about Jimmy Olsen, we actually begin before the founding of Metropolis, when it was only the settlement of New Oberstad, with a land dispute between Luthius Alexander and Joachim Olsen. That old sweet Olsen won't sell his land at the top of the Oberstad Falls, so naturally Luthius handles it in a negotiation style that his future family, the Luthers, would be known for. He shoves Joachim over the falls and then goes to have a celebratory drink. Using the history of the two families, which showcases that the Olsens are just as ingrained in Metropolis as the Luthers, since the Olsens struck gold that turned the outpost of New Oberstad into Metropolis, while the Luthers were nouveau riche oil barons, who just moved in and took over the place. We fast forward to a debate between Lex Luthor and a new character, Julian Olsen, as they argue about the removal of the historic Luthor's Lion statue, which then leads to how Julian's brother was why Julian failed to revitalize that. His brother, naturally, being Jimmy Olsen. Though, fun fact, apparently Mr. Action and Captain Dynamite and a couple other names Jimmy would have over the years was his late father's fake names. Today, he's the pal who fell to Earth, which better be a David Bowie reference or else. Yes, Jimmy Olsen is now in orbit of Earth, about to do an even more extreme Red Bull jump because one of the Jimmy's pals, which I assume is a Make-A-Wish style foundation, one of his pals, named Kevin, had a wish for him to do such a massive stunt without a parachute. To build on that, Jimmy Olsen has been granted stem cells from Metamorpho with Crazy Star Labs biomedical mumbo-jumbo mixing it with Draco lizard DNA, so it's all about just absolute insanity. Although, we do get a return of Turtle Boy as Jimmy gets pushed from the orbiter. And on the ground below, Sam Beckett hops into Clark Kent's body, one day hoping to make a leap home. Okay, no, it's still Clark. We will never get the Quantum Leap crossover, but he does get into his Superman suit quickly to save his Turtle Boy pal. Yes, Jimmy's jump was all sorts of wrong. They gave him the wrong batch of DNA. They dosed him too early. I want to say this is the most petty plan Lex Luthor has ever had, but at the same time, this is so within character that I'm sure this can't be the first time he's done something this over the top. But yes, all of that was a flashback to how Jimmy Olsen ruined his brother's crusade to save the monarch of Metropolis, the Luthor Lion. And Superman even uses his super speed to get rid of the plume of dust so it doesn't hurt anybody. And then we get a naked super duper from the now de-turtled Jimmy. However, it's not all nude sunbathing though, because Perry White is on the warpath, and Jimmy Olsen, Cub reporter, is no longer a Planeteer thanks to that. And I absolutely love Fraction for this phrase, ambulatory boondoggle. This isn't the first time Jimmy Olsen's done something like this, and even their insurance has an Olsen mitigation exclusion, because he keeps screwing up and the planet keeps paying for it. Now look, I'll be real. It's a fantastic scene, but Matt Fraction needs to write more Perry White. That is my major takeaway from this. We also do get a fun page of many other examples of Jimmy being a force unto himself for their insurance payout. However, the truth is that Jimmy's stunt, especially with ad revenue as it is basically the only reason that the Daily Planet is still getting any money because print media is dead. So Perry flips his script really quickly to wanting Jimmy to do more of that. However, Marisol Leon, who is currently the owner of the Daily Planet and head of the crime syndicate The Invisible Mafia, decides that while it may make money, Jimmy can't be in Metropolis, so he should be embedded to go do his insane videos and stunts far away. Where should he go? Well, cut over to Jimmy Olsen renting out, well, what looks to be my first apartment after high school. I kid, I never got to meet my slumlord face to face. However, point to his apartment because it comes with bats. Yes, the city he's moved to is famous for its bat population. No, it's not near Bracken Cave, but rather he's in the obvious DC choice, Gotham. And he's there trying to uncover his murder. Dun dun dun. Ending the issue on a hell of a cliffhanger straight from left field. I didn't want to say this at the beginning, but I read this when it came out in 2019, and I have all 12 issues hard copy because I absolutely love it. The humor is ever present, but never takes away from the scenes in place. Perry's rant about how Jimmy's like a teen on prom night with a sports car buzzing off a case of Natty Ice is absolutely perfect for both the character and so over the top that it's hilarious. The entire series is a fantastic, fun exploration of the DC universe while having a heart for the characters involved. But let's not gush too hard because we still have the conclusion to get to. See, told you we'd get to the conclusion. Jimmy Olsen has always been a major player in the DC universe, be it in radio, in television, and yes, especially in comics. He's what Rick Jones wanted to be in the Marvel Universe, a mainstay who embodied the everyman while having so many different superhero connections. It's why it was a major Twitter hashtag back when Batman vs. Superman shot him in the head without even a name drop, and then retroactively making him a random CIA operative pretending to be a Daily Planet reporter. But these two stories, the ones that we just covered, are Jimmy Olsen. Jimmy is competent, albeit young and inexperienced. He's rash and courageous, with a humor that never really could leave the character, even when comics became super dark. And of course, the comparison between Jimmy Olsen then and Jimmy Olsen now is a moot point, because he has existed as Superman's pal throughout nearly 75 years of history. He has grown to being the heart of the superheroic side of DC, very similar to Alfred in the Batman books, where there is a grounding heart. Yes, it is a bit of a cop-out that I don't bring up how people forget about Jimmy Olsen because comic books are a casual fan's nightmare, or that the great digitalization of the early 2010s means that Jimmy Olsen, before the New 52 spotlighted him, lost a lot of ground because a new generation couldn't see the greatness or even know the greatness of the character. But it's also why we as fans do need to focus on the bright spots. It's why we shouldn't focus on the betrayal of the character that the New 52 had, or that the Snyder flicks that brushed him off in less than 30 seconds of screen time. But we should rather read Matt Fraction's 12-issue maxi series and show fandoms and nerd culture that Jimmy Olsen matters. More than just Jimmy. Like I said with last week, and what I will say next week, everyone will have different interpretations of a character. And while there is no objective wrong way to change a character, celebrating the takes that are worth focusing on is what we need to do now more than ever. So my hat is off to Matt Fraction for being able to make a Jimmy Olsen comic worth talking about, even a couple years after it came out. And honestly, that's it for this video. If you agree, disagree, just want to share your personal favorite Jimmy Olsen moment, or your take on the character, leave a comment below. While you're down there, give a suggestion for the next Then and Now, or donate so I have to talk about the comics you want me to. More than that, it's free to like, subscribe, and share. So please, help the channel grow the best you can. We've still got about 750 subs before we can even think about monetizing. And I've got a lot in the tank, even after 8 years, 3 channels, and a handful of websites later. More than anything, though, I'm AJ Carey, the comic archivist, telling you to stay gold, Inklings.